Welcome to part 6 of the Mongoose Hello World series. So far, we've leveraged the powerful productivity UI for building the data model and UI for our store. We built facilities for customers, items, units of measure, and orders. We can run our app right now in the browser, and it looks like this. But the UI currently requires some orientation from our users. In this part, we'll build a zero training portal for our store, and we'll build a chart that can be displayed on a phone or a tablet. This will give us a feel for how easily we can leverage the rest of our application infrastructure and build graphic-oriented UIs. Let's start by building the chart. In WinStudio, enter Design Mode. Select Site Default for your editing scope, then go to Form, Definition, New. We want to create a new form, so click Next, and name the form Orders Chart. Select Grid Only for the form type, and Default for the device type. In the Data Source dropdown, type Orders, then click Next. The properties to include are OK by default, so click Next again. And here we can specify the order of the attributes of each property we've included in the primary collection. We just want to add the caption S item description to the item description attribute. And then we can click Next. And yes, we want to create the string. Click OK to accept the default string value. Then click Next and Finish. When the form opens, we see that since we chose grid only mode for the form type, we only have the grid which spans the entire length of the form. The grid is only for debugging in this case, so after we get everything set up, we're going to hide it so only the chart is visible. For now, let's shrink the grid by selecting it, and then clicking and dragging the corner. Click anywhere in the white space on the form to select the form properties, and expand Behavior. Set the form initial command to refresh, so it queries the orders immediately when it opens. We can also add a gradient to the form background. Expand the Appearance section, and then expand Background Color. Change the color type to Gradient, and select the colors that we want to blend together. I'll keep the top white, and then have it blend to a light gray. We can also change the direction of the blend in the Gradient Direction field. I'll keep it set to down, which is the default. Now we can add a chart component. Select the toolbox, and select the chart component, and click and drag one onto the form. Next, let's bind some data to the chart so it has something to display. With the chart selected, expand Data Source, and in the binding field, click the ellipsis. Select Chart for the type, then click Edit. From the Collection dropdown, select the primary collection, which is named Object. Below that, we can select the properties we want to display on the chart. Select Count, then click Add, then select Dir Order Total, then click Add, and then click OK until we're back on the form. Press the Save and Close button, and then reopen the Orders Chart form from the most recently used form list. Now that we're done adding the chart, let's hide the grid. Enter Design Mode, and select the grid. In the Properties panel under Behavior, set Hidden to True. Move the grid below the chart and we can reduce the size of the form and scale the grid to fit the form. When you're done, press the Save and Close button, and let's view our chart as a standalone web page. When we log into the app, everything we build is immediately available as a web page. You can build things like this form to be used as a standalone web page, and we can access the web page by using a specific URL. The format of the URL is http://yourwebserver/ws webclient/default.aspx?. Then you can add URL parameters like form only and no title. I'll show you the link that I would send out to allow people to access this form as a standalone web page. Open a browser and type http:// the server, which in my case is uscowslu7/ws web client /default.aspx ? And then the form parameters, page equals form only ampersand form equals orders chart ampersand no title equals 1. Anyone can view this link from their phone, their tablet, or their desktop browser. We could expand this chart to enable sales reps to see their particular orders. They could filter for the orders for the current week, or they could sort them by greatest amount, for example. Let's head back into WinStudio. Now we're going to start building a zero training portal version of our store, complete with graphics and form pages. The portal will consist of 3 form pages: a customer sign-in page, a home page that contains the products they can add to their cart by dragging and dropping the item picture, and a cart page that'll allow the customer to view the items in their cart. We'll start by building the components that will be present on all 3 form pages, like the header and footer images, and then we'll add the form pages to hold the content for each of the 3 form pages here in the middle of the form. Then we'll add the content for each page. You should have the zip file downloaded that contains the images we're going to use, but if not, pause the video and download them from the Mongoose portal. Unzip that file, and we can start importing the images. In design mode, go to Edit, Image. Click New, and browse to the images on your machine. Double-click the image to import it. Repeat this process until you've imported all of the images. In the Display Option dropdown, we can choose how we'd like to preview the image. I recommend the actual setting so we can see the native size of the image. Click Done, and we can create the form that will build this portal on. Go to Form, Definition, New. We want to create a new form, so click Next, and name it Store Portal. The form type is built from scratch, and the device type is default. In the Data Source dropdown, type Orders to select the order's IDO. Click Next, and Finish. Our new form opens, so let's start building. The images of our items were bound to a binary value. This time, we're going to have the images like our header and footer stored in the Forms database and displayed on a static component. Make the form a little larger. Select Static from the toolbox and click and drag a static component on the top of the form that will display the header image. Select the Static tool again and create a static to display the footer image. Next, select the button component from the toolbox and add 3 buttons. These will serve as the navigation between form pages. We need an edit box which will display our user, so select the edit component from the toolbox and click and drag one onto the form. We'll need a static to display our user icon to the left of the edit box, so select the static from the toolbox and click and drag one onto the form. In design mode, we have tools to help arrange and scale components. We want all 3 of these buttons to be the same size, so we can select them one by holding down Control, and selecting the one we want to have all the rest look like last. Then click the same size button to resize them all exactly the same as the last one we selected. There are also buttons for spacing components out equally horizontally or vertically. Press the Align Right Side button to bring all of the buttons in line. Now we should label the components we just created. This top button will take us to the sign-in page, so select it and name it BTN Sign-In, and set the caption to S Sign-In. Click the ellipsis, and yes, we want to create the string, then click OK to accept sign-in as the string value. The middle button will take us to the home page, so select it and name it BTN Home with a caption of S Home. Again, click the ellipsis, and yes, we want to create the string, Then click OK to accept home as the string value. The bottom button will take us to the cart page. Name it BTN Cart with the caption S Cart. Click the ellipsis. Yes, we want to create the string. Now on to the statics. Select the header static and name it Static Header. Expand the Appearance section, and in the bitmap file name field, drop the list and select the header.png image. By default, there's a colon enabled for static components because they're often used as labels for edit fields. Whenever you're using a static to display an image like we are here, it's a good idea to scroll down and expand Miscellaneous, then expand Specific Attributes and set no colon to true. We also have a few image display options under Data Source. Formatting. Drop the list in the Image Display field. Fit scales the image to take up the entire static while constraining the image's proportions. Fill stretches the image to fill the entire static. And Actual maintains the image file's native size. Let's use Fit. Select the footer static and name it Static Footer. And under the Appearance section, assign the footer.png. Scroll down to the bottom and set no colon to true. The last static we placed was the one for the user icon. Select it and name it Static User. Then select the user PNG image. Then scroll to the bottom and set no colon to true. The last component we need to label is the edit that will display the customer ID. Select it and name it Edit Customer ID. Now let's use some of the design tools to clean up our layout. Resize the static so the images can fill the entire static. Remember that we can select multiple components by holding down Control, then pressing an Align button to get the components to line precisely. Time to create the form pages. Select the Form Pages tool from the toolbox and click on the form. There we just created a form page. Select the Form Page tool again and click again on the form to create the second form page. One more time, select the Form Page tool and then click on the form to create the third form page. At the bottom of the Properties panel, make sure the Component Toggle button is selected, and in the drop-down at the top of the Properties panel, we can select the first form page. Name it Sign-In Page, then press Enter. Select the second form page and name it Home Page, then hit Enter. Then select the third, name it Cart Page, and hit Enter. And then we can press the Save and Close button. Reopen the form from the most recently used form list. The form model in Mongoose includes a container mechanism that applies to several types of components. For example, grid columns are contained in grids, notebook tabs in notebooks, and many types of components can be contained on notebook tabs and form pages. An important attribute for a contained component is container sequence. For form pages, this is a zero-based index, and it controls which page is current when the form opens. In the next step, we're going to create navigation between form pages by using an event handler called GoToFormPage. Enter Design Mode. Our Home button needs to take us to the Home form page. The first step is to make this button generate an event. Select the Home button, and in the Events tab, type GoToHome into the primary event field. Doing this will make this button generate an event named GoToHome when it's pressed. Click the ellipsis on the primary event field to take us to the Event Handlers window. Click New, and we want to handle the GoToHome event that's selected by default, so set the response type to GoToFormPage, make the new form page current. Then click the ellipsis in the Parameters field. Click on Type Specific Parameters and select the form page that we want this button to take us to, which is the Home form page. Click OK until you're back on the form. Well, the Home button is all linked up now, so we can move on to the Sign In button. Select it, and in the primary event field, we want this button to generate an event called GoTo Sign In. Again, click the ellipsis on the primary event field to take us to the Event Handlers window. Then click on New, and we want to handle the event that the Sign In button is generating, which we named GoTo Sign In. The response type is GoTo Form Page, and then click the ellipsis in the Parameters field. We want this button to take us to the Sign In form page, so select Sign In Page, and then click OK until you're back to the form, and save. Now when we click the Sign In Page button, we'll be taken to the Sign In form page, but we should also add another function to this button. In addition to taking us to the form page, the button should also clear the customer ID, so we don't have to clear it manually before we can sign in with a different customer ID. We can add another event handler that also handles the GoTo Sign In event, which will clear the customer ID. To do that, go to Edit, Event Handler. Notice that we see the two event handlers that we just created. Click the New button, and we want to handle the event that the Sign In button is generating, which is named GoTo Sign In. The response type is Set Values. Then click the ellipsis on the Parameters field, then on Type Specific Parameters. In the Variables box, type Customer ID equals. This will effectively clear the customer ID. Click OK back to the Event Handlers window, and now we see the third handler. Notice that both of these are handling the same GoTo Sign In event that the Sign In button is generating. Click Done to get back to the form. The last button is the Cart button that needs to take us to the Cart form page. Select the Cart button, and in the Events panel, type GoTo Cart in the primary event field. Click the ellipsis to open the event handlers, and then click New. The event to handle defaults to GoTo Cart, which is what we want, and the response type needs to be GoTo Form Page. Click the ellipsis in the Parameters field, then on Type Specific Parameters, and we can specify that we want this button to take us to the Cart page, and then click OK back to the form. Press the Save and Close button, and then reopen the form from the most recently used form list, and enter Design Mode. Now that we have the navigation between form pages working, we can create the content for each individual form page. We're currently on the Sign In form page, so let's start building that. We can check to see what each component is contained to in the Properties panel. If we select one of the components we created, like the Sign In button, expand Layout, then Containment, the container field is blank, meaning that it doesn't have a container, so it's going to be visible on every form page. Because we're on the Sign In form page, any components we create now will be contained to the Sign In form page unless we choose to override. We'll need an edit box on the Sign In page, so select the Edit component from the toolbox and drag one onto the form. Now we see that the container for this edit is the Sign In page. Drop the list, and we could choose to contain this component to another form page if we wanted to. Let's look at our mockup and see what we'll need on this Sign In form page. We'll need an edit box that the user can type their customer ID into, which we just created. We'll need a static component that will act as a label for the edit box that'll read customer ID. And then we'll need a second static that will contain the circle image, and then finally the button that the user will click to sign in. We've already created that edit box, so let's select it, and we can name it Edit Sign In Page Customer ID. This naming convention would come in handy when we're looking at all of our components in a list. We'll be able to easily tell that this is an edit component, it's on the Sign In page, and it pertains to the customer ID. Expand data source, and in the binding field, type variables.customerID. Next, let's create the static that'll be the label for the edit box. Name it Static Sign In Customer ID, with a caption of S Customer ID. Next, we need a button. We've already used the name BTN Sign-In, so let's name this one BTN Sign-In Page Sign In. Then assign the caption S Sign-In. Click on the Events tab, and in the primary event field, select the event Go to Home. Doing this will make this button generate the event Go to Home when it's pressed, which will trigger the event handler that will take us to the home form page. Note that we could build an app which used and required Mongoose user accounts, in which case we could let the default Mongoose sign-in page do part of this, adding only the Create Account functionality. But for this example, we'll simply ask the customer to type in a customer ID and press the sign-in button. We need to bind this edit to the customer ID variable, so it'll display the customer ID that we're logged in as. Select the edit, and in the binding field, type variables.customerID. Remember that this is the shorthand. We could have gotten this value by clicking on the ellipsis and walking through the steps. Press the Save and Close button, and then clear the cache by pressing Ctrl-U. Then reopen the form to test. Type 1 into the customer ID edit, and press the button to log in. Nice, now we're on the home form page, logged in as the customer with an ID of 1, which is the customer that we created named Clark. If we click the cart button, it'll take us to the cart form page, which is also blank, and then we can click the sign in button to clear the customer ID and take us back to the sign in form page. Enter design mode and let's hide some of these components if we're not signed in. For example, we don't need the navigation buttons until the user is signed in. To do this, we can use the Enabled When or Visible When fields. Select the Home button and expand the Behavior section. Click on the ellipsis on the Enabled When field. We only want this to be enabled when customer ID has a value. Click on the Edit Left Value button and select Variable Value. And the variable we want is customer ID, then click OK. For the operator, select Not Equal To, and in the right value field, type 2 double quotes to indicate a value of empty string. Click OK to get back to the form and select the Cart button. Do the same thing here for the Cart button. Click the Edit Left Value button and select Variable Value. The variable again is customer ID, then click OK. The operator is Not Equal To, and in the right value field, type 2 double quotes, and then click OK to get back to the form. The customer ID edit box and user icon static don't serve a purpose until we're logged in, so those should be hidden unless we're logged in. Select the static and repeat the procedure, but this time in the Visible When field. Then click the Edit Left Value button and select Variable Value, and the variable is customer ID. For the operator Not Equal To, and in the right value field, type 2 double quotes. Click OK to get back to the form, and select the customer ID edit. Again, click the ellipsis in the Visible When field, click the Edit Left Value button, and select Variable Value, and the variable is customer ID, then we can click OK. The operator is Not Equal To, and in the right value field, type 2 double quotes. Click OK to get back to the form, and we should also set this edit as read only. Under Behavior, change read only to true. Okay, next we need to set up the collections for our orders. Select the form properties by clicking a blank space in the form, and then click on the Collections tab. We need to add a secondary collection using our Items IDO that'll be used for the shopping cart. To create the secondary collection, select Collection, then click on New. Under Definition, Collection, select Items. In this standard operations section, we want to turn Navigate and Refresh to True. Now we can save and close the form, and then reopen it. Onto the Home form page. To navigate to the home form page, sign in using a customer ID and then click on Sign In. Now we're on the home form page and we can get started. Checking out our mockup, we'll need a grid to display the items in our store, a static for the item picture, and a static that we can drag items onto to add them to the cart. We'll also need a count edit and a count static for the label. Enter design mode and create a grid. Name it Grid Items. Then under Data Source, click the ellipsis in the binding field. The type is a secondary collection grid, and then click the Edit button. Select the item's secondary collection, then click OK to get back to the form. We get a prompt saying that we need to rerun the form, so press Save and Close, and then reopen the form. Again, the form opens on the sign-in page, so we want to sign in using a customer ID, and now we're back on the home form page, and we can enter design mode. On the Collections tab, expand the secondary collection, and then click and drag item onto the grid. Click the form to select the form properties again, and then click and drag cost onto the grid. We get a prompt that says we'll need to reload the form to establish the binding. Click OK. Now for the item picture. Create a static. Name it Static Item Picture. And set the caption to M blank. Then expand Miscellaneous. Then Specific Attributes, and we can set no colon to true. To bind this static to the picture property, click the ellipsis in the binding field. The type is property. Then we can click Edit and select Secondary Collection. Then we can select the picture property from the secondary collection. When you're done, click OK to get back to the form. Again, we get the prompt stating that we'll need to reload the form to establish the binding. Click OK. Remember that as a form runs, Mongoose generates standard events that can be handled just like the events that we generate. What we want to do is query the items when the form is done initializing. To do that, we'll need to handle the standard event, standard form init completed. This event is generated when the form has been initially displayed and has completed its initialization processing. To create the event handler, select Edit, Event Handlers. Click New, and we want to handle that standard event, which is named Standard Form Init Completed. Set the response type to Collection Refresh, and then click on the ellipsis in the Parameters field, then on Type Specific Parameters, and we can specify that we want to refresh the secondary collection. Click OK back to the form, and then click the Save and Close Form button and unload the cache with Ctrl U. Reopen the form and log in again using a customer ID. We now see the list of items in the grid, and the item's picture is on the static. To clean up the grid, enter Design Mode. Select the grid, then click on the Edit Grid Columns button in the top left corner. Select Grid Column 1 and press the Delete button. Then click OK. Then select Grid Column 2, press the Delete button, and click OK. Now we're left with just those two columns that we added. Click OK to get back to the form. Now let's customize the font that's used on the grid by creating a component class. Go to Edit, Component Class, and then click New. It's always a good practice to leverage the inheritance model whenever we can. Once we create the component class and assign the font there, if we decide to change it later, we'll just need to make the changes there on the component class, and our modifications will be applied to every component that's inheriting this component class. Let's name the component class Store Grid Font. Then in the Appearance section, click the ellipsis in the font field. I'll set the font to Arial Regular with a size of 10. Click OK to get back to the form, and then we can save and clear the cache with Ctrl U. To apply the component class to the grid, select it and expand Inheritance. In the component class field, drop the list and select Store Grid Font. We can also turn off row headers while we're here under the Miscellaneous section. And the last thing is to make the cost column read-only. With the grid selected, click on the Edit Grid Columns button, and then we can select the Cost Grid column and expand the Behavior section. Turn Read-Only to True, then click OK to get back to the form. Press the Save and Close Form button, and then reopen the form. Log in again and navigate to the Home Form page. Let's take another look at our mockup. The customer needs to be able to select an item from the grid, specify a quantity, and then add however many of those items they want to their shopping cart. We still need that static that reads count, the edit box where they'll actually enter their count, and then the static component that they can drag the item picture onto to add it to the cart. Enter design mode and create the static. Name it Static Home Count with a caption of S count. Click the ellipsis to create the string. Next, create an edit. And name it Edit Home Count. Then in the binding field, type variables.count to bind it to the count variable. Next, we want to add the static that the users can drag their items onto. Name the static Add to Cart. Expand the Appearance section and assign the Add to Cart PNG. Don't forget to scroll down to the bottom and set No colon to True. It looks like this image is getting a little smashed, so I'll make the static taller. Now let's add the functionality so we can drag the item static and drop it onto this Add to Cart static to add an item to the cart. The first thing we want to do is select the item picture static. Then click on the Events tab. In the Drag From Event field, click the ellipsis. In the Event to Add dropdown, type Add to Cart, and then click the Add button. Note that you won't see this event name in the dropdown list because we haven't created it yet. Click OK. Now we need to give it something to drag on to, which is the Add to Cart static. Select the Add to Cart static, then click on the Events tab. This time in the Drop On Event field, click the ellipsis. Then in the Event to Add field, type Add to Cart, and then click Add and OK. So we just told Mongoose to enable the drag cursor from the item picture static and to enable the drop cursor when dragging to the cart static. These two are linked in this way because there's at least one matching event name between its drag from event list and the cart static's drop on event list, which is our event named Add to Cart. When the drop occurs, Mongoose will generate the first matching event, which will be Add to Cart. Now we're going to create the event handlers that will handle the Add to Cart event once it's generated. In the Edit menu, select Event Handlers. Create a new handler that handles the event Set New Cart Entry. The type is Set Values. And then in the Parameters field, we can type in the shorthand. Set Prop Values, parenthesis item equals, P parenthesis 2 dot item, close parenthesis, comma space, count equals V parenthesis, count, close parenthesis, comma space customer ID equals V parenthesis, customer ID, close parenthesis, close parenthesis. Remember that we could have walked step by step to get this value if we don't already know it. So what did all of that mean? Well, click on the ellipsis in the parameters field, and then on the type specific button. Check out the properties field. The first thing we typed was set prop values, which told WinStudio that what we're going to type are the values of the properties that need to be set. Click OK to get back to the Event Handlers window. Add another event handler, and this one will handle our event Add to Cart. The response type is Collection Make Current. Then click on the ellipsis in the Parameters field, then on Type Specific Parameters, and we can set the collection to the primary collection. Click OK to get back to the Event Handlers window. Next, create another event handler that also handles the Add to Cart event. The response is Generate Event. Then click the ellipsis in the Parameters field, then on Type Specific Parameters, then select the event to generate to Standard Form New. When Standard Form New is generated, the current collection of orders get a new row, and all components bound to properties on that collection will have their default values applied. The variable bound components are also considered to be associated with the primary collection, so they too will have their default values applied when Standard Form New is generated. We don't want that to happen, so we'll use an attribute called Do Not Clear Values on New in the next step. The last event handler we need to create needs to handle the Add to Cart event. The response type is Generate Event, and then click the ellipsis in the Parameters field, then on Type Specific Parameters, and the event we want to generate is Set New Cart Entry. Check the box to post the event asynchronously. We can tell WinStudio to process the current thread before pulling this next step off of the queue and processing, which is one way to do this scenario. Click OK back to the form. Now we can select the Customer ID edit up here on the top right of our form, and under the Behavior section, expand New and Copy operations, and Do Not Clear Values on New is set to False by default. Change that to True. We also want to set Do Not Clear Values on New to True for the Count edit. We also want to set this to True on the Customer ID edit that's on the Sign-In form page. So let's enter Run Mode, navigate to the Sign-In form page, then enter Design Mode. We can select the Customer ID edit, and then set Do Not Clear Values on New to True. When you're all done, click Save. We get a prompt that says that the scount string isn't locked. Save anyway? Click Yes. Before we can test, we need to set up the collection for our shopping cart. Navigate to the cart form page again by entering Run Mode, and then signing in with the Customer ID. Then we can click the Cart button to browse to the cart form page. Enter Design Mode, and create a grid on the form. Name it Grid Orders, and under Data Source in the Binding field, click the ellipsis. The type is Primary Collection, then click OK. We get a prompt saying that we need to rerun the form for the binding to take effect, so click OK and press the Save and Close button. Then reopen the form from the most recently used form list. Navigate back to the cart form page by signing in with a Customer ID and clicking on the Cart button. Now that the grid's created, let's drag some of the properties from the primary collection onto the grid. Enter Design Mode and click on a blank spot in the form to select the form properties. And on the Collections tab, expand the primary collection, which is Orders. Drag on Count, click OK to the prompt, and then click the form again to select it. Drag on Customer ID, and click OK to the prompt. Click on the form again to select the form properties, then drag Item onto the grid, and click OK to the prompt. Click on the form again to select the form properties, and drag on Order Number, and then click OK. Select the grid, and click the Edit Grid Columns button. Select Grid Column 1, press the Delete button, then click OK. Then select Grid Column 2, press the Delete button. Now we're left with the 4 grid columns that we created. Press the Save and Close button, and let's reopen the form and test. Enter a Customer ID and click the Sign In button. On the Home form page, enter account into the edit, and then click and drag an item onto the Add to Cart static. Click on the Cart button to navigate to the Cart form page and verify that our items have been added to the grid on the Cart page. Looks good. Now that our customers can add items to their cart, they'll need to be able to save their order. Enter design mode, and we want to create a button. Name it BTN Checkout with the caption S Checkout. On the Events tab in the primary event field, type Checkout to generate an event called Checkout. Click the ellipsis in the primary event field to open the Event Handlers window. We want to handle the Checkout event, and this event handler needs to have a response type of collection save. Then click on the ellipsis in the parameters field, then on type specific parameters, and we can specify the primary collection, which is Store Portal. Click OK to get back to the form. We want to make all of the grid columns except for Count Read Only, so select the grid and press the Edit Grid Columns button. Select the Customer ID column and under Behavior set Read Only to True. Repeat the process for the item and order number columns. Click OK back to the form and let's apply the font component class to this grid. With the grid still selected, expand Inheritance, drop the component class list, and select Store Grid Font. The blue star next to the first row of this grid indicates that we have a modified row that's not been saved. To test our checkout button, enter Run Mode and press the Checkout button. The star disappears, indicating that the collection is now saved, which means our button is working properly. Press the Save and Close button, and we'll be asked if we want to save the form definition, which we do, so click Yes. Let's test the store out by reopening the form and signing in. Enter account, and drag the item picture over the Add to Cart static. Click on the Cart button to verify that our items have been added to the secondary collection, and then add a few more items. When we're all done, we can click the Checkout button to save our order. Now let's put the cherry on top. Click the Sign In button to navigate to the Sign In page. Enter Design Mode, and add a static that's going to hold our handshake image. Name it Static Logo, and assign the handshake.png image. And then scroll to the bottom and set no colon to true. We can also use the glue function to allow components to move or stretch when the user manipulates the size of the form. For example, let's set the glue right function on the Customer ID edit by selecting it and then expand Layout, Glue, and set glue right to true. Save and enter Run Mode. Stretch the form from the right edge. As you can see, as we stretch it horizontally, the right side of the component stays glued to the right side of the form. Let's look at another example. If we wanted the Sign In button to stick to the right side of the form, but maintain its size, we would set glue right and glue left to true. Select the Sign In button and set glue left and glue right to true. Enter Run Mode and stretch the form horizontally again. With both glue left and glue right set to true, the component will stick to the right side of the form and maintain its size. With the edit box, we can see that since we only have glue right set to true, as we stretch the form, the edit box will expand to maintain the distance between the right side of that component and the right side of the form. When you're all done, remember to save. After a few minor tweaks and additions, we can see that it's simple to make a slick-looking zero training UI that's ready to run in the web using the form-only URL. I mentioned earlier that we have multiple options for login. We could provide specific user IDs to our users so that we could use row-level security. Mongoose also supports single sign-on mechanisms. Or we could build an account mechanism like we did here with customer IDs, only we would require passwords too. Mongoose also supports a guest login mechanism, which would bring all users into the page without requiring any sign-on. There are a lot of concepts that we didn't have a chance to dive deep into with this series, and there's much more you can learn. These concepts include validators, lists, events, and event handlers, form scripting and adding code into the IDO layer via .NET IDO extension classes. Other components like notebooks, browsers, diagrams, data views, and KPIs. Data views are available on any form providing in-place business intelligence. You can create key performance indicator graphical displays that can be added to any form. Multiple collections like parent-child that we call sub-collections. These are useful for order headers and order lines, for example. The application event system. This is a major subsystem for adding server-side logic without writing code, allowing you to set rules for automation, workflow, and integration, leveraging IDOs in a wide range of options. Integration with ION and IDO web service interface and replication. Mongoose apps have interfaces to Microsoft reporting services. Alternative layouts for mobile devices, allowing you to create your core logic one time and have the form adapt for different devices. Mongoose has enterprise class security, where you can set policy at the role or user level for forms, IDOs, field level, and row level policies. Your next step is the Mongoose Fundamentals series. Additional training and documentation is available on the Mongoose portal, and you can contact us at mongoose@infor.com.